There was an article that was purported to have been written by her in one of the magazine, one of the Star or whatever those terrible things are, in which she made certain assertions and accusations that none of us ever believed a word of it.
Television history is filled with controversial moments, but few decisions have sparked as much debate as the ending of Happy Days. For 11 seasons, this beloved sitcom brought families together, creating memories that would last generations. Yet when the curtain finally fell in 1984, it wasn't a graceful exit that fans remember. It was a chaotic mess that left audiences bewildered and angry. What really happened behind the scenes, and which pivotal moments sealed the show's fate forever? When Happy Days premiered in 1974, nobody could have predicted it would become one of the most successful sitcoms in television history. Set in 1950s Milwaukee, the show offered nostalgic comfort during a turbulent era in America. Families gathered around their television sets each week to watch the Cunningham household navigate the challenges of everyday life, from teenage romance to parent-child conflicts, all wrapped in the warm glow of post-war optimism. The show's creator, Gary Marshall, had crafted something special, a series that spoke to multiple generations simultaneously. Parents appreciated the wholesome family values and the reminder of simpler times, while younger viewers connected with the teenage characters and their relatable struggles. This broad appeal translated into massive ratings, making Happy Days one of ABC's most valuable properties throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s. The ensemble cast became household names. Ron Howard's portrayal of Richie Cunningham, the all-American teenager with a good heart and occasional naivety, anchored the show's moral center. Tom Bosley and Marion Ross brought warmth and wisdom as parents Howard and Marion Cunningham, representing the idealized American family unit. Anson Williams and Dawn most rounded out the teenage friend group as Potsy and Ralph, providing comic relief and loyal companionship. But it was Henry Winkler's Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli who transformed the show from a hit into a cultural phenomenon. The leather jacket-wearing, motorcycle-riding cool guy with a heart of gold captured America's imagination. His catchphrase, "Hey," became part of the national vocabulary, and his thumbs-up gesture was imitated by children coast to coast. The Fonz represented rebellion, that parents could accept tough on the outside but fundamentally decent, always ready to help the Cunningham family when needed. By the show's third season, Happy Days had climbed to the top of the Nielsen ratings, where it would remain for years. The series spawned successful spin-offs including Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy, creating an entire universe of interconnected shows that dominated ABC's lineup. Merchandise flew off store shelves, from lunchboxes to action figures. Happy Days had transcended television to become a genuine piece of American culture. However, success brought its own complications. As the show evolved, tensions emerged both in front of and behind the camera. Ron Howard, who had entered the series as its clear lead, found himself gradually sharing more screen time with Henry Winkler's breakout character. While Howard handled this shift professionally, industry insiders noted the delicate balancing act required to maintain the show's ensemble nature while capitalizing on the Fonz's popularity. Behind the scenes, creative disagreements occasionally surfaced. Writers debated how to keep storylines fresh after years on the air. Should characters evolve significantly, or should the show maintain its comforting consistency? How much should the series acknowledge the passage of time versus maintaining its nostalgic, frozen in amber quality? These questions grew more pressing as the show entered its 8th, 9th, and 10th seasons territory few sitcoms had successfully navigated. Cast members also faced personal crossroads. Ron Howard increasingly focused on his directing career, which created scheduling challenges. Other actors contemplated life beyond Happy Days, wondering if they would be forever typecast in these roles. Henry Winkler, despite his tremendous success, privately worried about being unable to escape the Fonz's shadow. These individual concerns created an undercurrent of uncertainty about the show's long-term future. Network executives at ABC added another layer of complexity. They viewed Happy Days as a reliable ratings generator and revenue stream, making them reluctant to consider ending the series, even as some involved with the production felt it might be approaching a natural conclusion. This disconnect between creative fulfillment and business interests would ultimately play a crucial role in how the show's final chapter unfolded. 1983, discussions about ending Happy Days began in earnest. After a decade on the air, several factors aligned to suggest the time had come for a proper conclusion. Ron Howard's commitment to directing meant his availability for the show was increasingly limited. Ratings, while still respectable, had declined from their stratospheric peak. Most importantly, Gary Marshall and the writing team felt they had told the stories they wanted to tell. The decision was made season 11 would be Happy Days' last. This gave everyone involved time to plan a worthy send-off for a show that had meant so much to so many people. Marshall began conceptualizing how to honor both the characters and the audience that had remained loyal for over a decade. He wanted the finale to feel definitive, yet uplifting, acknowledging the end while celebrating everything the show had represented. The writers crafted storylines throughout the final season that would bring appropriate closure to character arcs. Joni and Chachi's relationship would culminate in marriage, giving fans the happy ending they'd anticipated. Fonzie would achieve a personal milestone that demonstrated his growth from cool rebel to responsible adult. The Cunningham parents would reflect on how their children had matured into capable young adults, ready to build their own families. Marshall knew the finale itself needed something extraordinary, a moment that would resonate emotionally and distinguish this ending from typical sitcom conclusions. He proposed an unconventional idea that would spark fierce debate with network executives, having Howard Cunningham speak directly to the viewing audience, breaking television's so-called fourth wall. This technique was rarely used in sitcoms of that era, considered risky because it could shatter the fictional illusion that made viewers care about characters. ABC's reaction was immediate and negative. Executives argued that such a dramatic departure from the show's established format could alienate viewers rather than satisfy them. They worried it would feel gimmicky, undermining the emotional authenticity of the farewell. Marshall faced pressure to reconsider, to find a more conventional way to conclude the series, but he remained convinced that acknowledging the unique relationship between the show and its audience was essential to a truly meaningful goodbye. After weeks of negotiations and creative discussions, Marshall prevailed. ABC reluctantly approved his vision, though concerns lingered within the network's executive ranks. The finale episode, titled Passages, was scheduled to air on May 8, 1984. As production began, the cast and crew approached it with unusual reverence, understanding they were creating something significant. Tom Bosley prepared extensively for his climactic scene. The speech Marshall had written would require him to step out of character while remaining entirely true to Howard Cunningham's essence, a delicate balance. Bosley would need to look into the camera and speak not just as the fictional father of Richie and Joni, but as a representative of everyone who had worked on the show, thanking the millions of Americans who had invited these characters into their homes week after week. When filming day arrived, the set carried a palpable sense of occasion. Cast members who had worked together for over a decade shared emotional moments between takes. Crew members who had been with the show since its early seasons felt the weight of witnessing an era's end. Even the studio audience, typically boisterous and quick to laugh, seemed to sense they were participating in television history. The finale's plot brought multiple storylines to satisfying conclusions. Emotional beats landed perfectly as characters acknowledged how their lives had changed and grown. Comic moments provided relief from the sentiment without undercutting it. Everything built toward the final scene in the Cunningham living room, where Howard would deliver his unprecedented direct address. When Bosley looked into the camera and began speaking, something magical happened. His words expressing gratitude for the simple joys of family life, acknowledging the privilege of raising good children and watching them become loving adults, transcended the fictional framework. For those few minutes, the boundary between actor and character, between television show and audience experience, dissolved completely. Bosley wasn't just acting, he was genuinely thanking viewers for their years of support and connection. The scene concluded with Howard Cunningham raising his glass and offering a final toast to happy days. The camera slowly pulled back as the family shared this moment together, then faded to black. It was over. 11 seasons, 255 episodes, and countless memories all brought to a close with grace and genuine emotion. When Passages aired on May 8, 1984, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Critics praised the finale's emotional resonance and Marshall's bold choice to break the fourth wall. Viewers called and wrote to ABC expressing their appreciation for such a heartfelt conclusion. For a brief moment, it seemed Happy Days had achieved the rare feat of ending on its own terms with dignity intact. Then everything fell apart. ABC had a problem one created months earlier by a scheduling conflict with the 1984 Winter Olympics. When the network committed to extensive Olympic coverage in February, several Happy Days episodes scheduled for that period were pushed aside. At the time, this seemed like a minor logistical issue that could be resolved later, but later arrived after the finale had already aired, leaving ABC with completed episodes that had never been broadcast. The sensible solution would have been to shelve these orphaned episodes, accepting them as casualties of scheduling realities. The finale had provided closure. There was no narrative need for additional installments. But ABC made a different calculation, one driven by financial considerations rather than storytelling integrity. These episodes represented completed content the network had already paid for, and advertising slots could still generate revenue. So in June 1984, just weeks after the emotional farewell, ABC announced Happy Days would return with new episodes. Viewers were understandably confused. They had processed the show's ending, said their goodbyes, and moved on emotionally. Now they were being told the show wasn't actually over. The episodes that aired throughout the summer felt like ghosts haunting a story that had already concluded. Without context about the Olympics scheduling disruption, audiences couldn't understand why they were watching events that chronologically took place before the finale they'd already seen. The situation grew more bizarre with each passing week. These weren't special behind-the-scenes retrospectives or cast reunion specials. They were regular episodes that simply aired out of sequence. Characters who had reached meaningful conclusions in the finale were now back in earlier storylines, creating a disorienting temporal loop. The sacred finality of Passages had been violated, undermined by episodes that contradicted the closure viewers had experienced. Within the television industry, ABC's handling of Happy Days' conclusion became an instant cautionary tale. Producers, writers, and executives across Hollywood watched in dismay as one of America's most beloved sitcoms had its legacy tarnished by what many viewed as corporate short-sightedness. The decision to air post-finale episodes prioritized immediate financial gain over long-term brand preservation, a calculation that backfired spectacularly. Other networks took careful note. In the years that followed, programming contracts began including specific provisions to protect series finales from similar scheduling disasters. The concept of finale sanctity emerged an understanding that once a show officially ends, that ending must be respected and preserved. While this might seem obvious in retrospect, ABC's blunder with Happy Days established the explicit rules that future network executives would follow. The incident also influenced how television shows approached their final seasons. Producers became more cautious about production schedules, ensuring all episodes would air in proper sequence before any finale. Some negotiated contractual guarantees that their final episodes would be immune to preemption or rescheduling. No matter what conflicts emerged, the entertainment industry learned a valuable but painful lesson. Audiences invest emotionally in television narratives, and betraying that investment carries real consequences. For Happy Days specifically, the damage proved lasting. While the show remains fondly remembered and continues finding new audiences through syndication and streaming, discussions of its conclusion inevitably mention the post-finale confusion. What should be remembered as one of television's most poignant endings is instead recalled as a case study in how not to conclude a series. The beautiful moment when Tom Bosley looked into the camera and thanked America for being part of the Cunningham family's journey exists now under the shadow of what came after. The impact extended beyond abstract discussions of television history and legacy. For the people who had dedicated years of their lives to Happy Days, ABC's decision felt like a betrayal. Cast members who had invested emotionally in crafting a meaningful farewell watched helplessly as their work was undercut. Gary Marshall, who had fought so hard for his vision of the finale, saw his carefully planned conclusion cheapened by episodes that served no creative purpose. Henry Winkler later spoke about the confusion and disappointment of that period. After spending a decade building the Fonz into an iconic character, he had made peace with saying goodbye. The finale had provided catharsis, allowing him to close that chapter of his life. But ABC's decision to resurrect the show temporarily denied him and his castmates that clean break, prolonging the attachment to roles they needed to move beyond. For Tom Bosley, whose emotional direct address had been the finale's centerpiece, the post-finale episodes diminished what should have been a career highlight. His performance in that final scene represented some of his finest work, but instead of being celebrated as the definitive conclusion it deserved to be, it became one ending among several confusing endpoints. The power of his words thanking viewers for sharing in the Cunningham family's journey lost some of its impact when the journey awkwardly continued without explanation. The writers and producers who had carefully structured the final season to provide satisfying narrative closure felt similarly frustrated. They had made deliberate creative choices about which storylines to resolve and how to honor the show's themes. Every element of the finale had been thoughtfully considered and executed. Watching their work contradicted by orphaned episodes that disrupted the carefully constructed narrative arc proved deeply disheartening. Looking back 4 decades later, it's worth considering how differently things might have played out. If ABC had simply absorbed the financial loss of unaired episodes and preserved the integrity of the finale, Happy Days would be remembered unambiguously as one of television's great success stories, a show that ran for 11 seasons, maintained quality throughout, and ended with dignity. Tom Bosley's fourth wall-breaking speech would stand as an uncomplicated moment of television excellence, studied and celebrated without qualification. The network could have repurposed the orphaned episodes in various creative ways. A special presentation acknowledging them as lost episodes that took place before the finale might have satisfied viewer curiosity without undermining the conclusion. Releasing them directly to home video with proper context could have turned them into collector's items rather than confusing afterthoughts. Even the radical choice to simply never air them, treating them as archived material for future retrospectives, would have been preferable to the chaotic rollout that actually occurred. Instead, ABC's choice created one of television's strangest anomalies, a show that ended multiple times, with different episodes serving as the last one depending on when viewers stopped watching. For fans who tuned out after passages, that remained the definitive finale. For others who continued watching through the summer, the experience was one of gradually diminishing returns as the show limped to various stopping points that lacked the emotional weight of what had come before. The story of Happy Days ending ultimately became a story about respecting your audience and the narratives they've invested in. Television shows exist in a unique relationship with their viewers, one built over time through consistent weekly engagement. When that relationship is honored, as it was in Passages, the results can be genuinely moving. When it's violated by decisions that prioritize other considerations, the damage can be severe and lasting. Despite the troubled conclusion, Happy Days' cultural legacy remains substantial. The show influenced subsequent sitcoms, demonstrated the viability of nostalgic programming, and created characters that endure in popular consciousness. The Fonz remains one of television's most recognizable figures, and the show's theme song still evokes powerful memories for those who grew up with it. New generations continue discovering the series.